Welcome to Unlocked, the home of common sense that speaks Britain's language, with me, Martin Daubney. It's a new year, and as you can see, we've got a new home. Thanks to your support, just 8 months after launching, we're now the UK's number 6 news and current affairs channel on Facebook, hot on the heels of well-funded media like Sky News and Talk Radio. It's fair to say Unlocked is expanding faster than Piers Morgan's waistline after an all-inclusive trip to Antigua. In this episode of Unlocked, we will be discussing the police state we're in. It's commonly accepted that we need the police to maintain law and order, but they need to be seen to police without fear nor favour. Every day now, we hear reports of British citizens being arrested or fined for sitting on park benches, meeting friends to go for a walk, or even visiting elderly relatives in care homes. But this isn't going to change anytime soon. Oh no, there is a very real sense that this is just the beginning. Yesterday, the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, announced that 45,000 citizens have now been arrested or issued with fines for refusing to comply with COVID-19 restrictions. You think that's bad? Last night, the chair of the National Police Chiefs Council said, "We will not waste time trying to reason with people." But there's more. While the police are increasingly drunk on dictatorial power afforded them by COVID, it would appear they have also been consumed by the woke virus. 1 minute they are taking the knee to Black Lives Matter or allowing the cenotaph to be vandalised. The next they are putting the boot into anti-lockdown protests. Are we seeing evidence of a two-tiered policing system? Today, to discuss what can be done about this, we are joined by Laurence Fox, leader of the Reclaim Party, who will exclusively unveil to Unlocked his explosive plans to take back control of law and order, one police force at a time. With me in the studio, we'll be joined by Harry Miller, a former beat copper from Humberside and founder of Fair Cop, who will be aiding and abetting Laurence in that fight. Finally, we have Deneise Florence-Dukes, a former sergeant in the Metropolitan Police Force and presently a councillor in East Staffordshire, who has formerly sat on the Staffordshire Police and Crime Panel. She will give a sense of what bobbies on the beat are feeling about all of this. But before we cut to our guests, let's look at a selection of videos that Unlock has compiled that sums up the schizophrenic state that modern policing finds itself in. Okay, Laurence Fox, before we move on to your questions, what do you make of the videos there, mate?
I mean, you know, isn't it great to watch policemen take the knee and dancing and then beating the hell out of people? It's a two-tiered system. It's just the police force shouldn't be a political entity, and they are a political entity, and they're becoming more so. And it's very depressing to watch. It shouldn't be happening in this country.
So why is it, do you think, that we do have this emergence of an increasingly politicised policing system? And do you feel at the moment that we are moving towards the grim reality of a police state?
Well, even my mates on the left are saying that the best case scenario is that we're heading towards a police state, and it's with the best intentions that these happen. Everyone's trying to go, well, we need to reduce transmission of this virus. So, any means are acceptable, but they're not acceptable. The trust, the finely balanced trust between the police and the public is important, and it's being let down. And even just watching Hancock this morning on TV, just the arrogance of the man saying, I haven't decided this. And we've politicized everything. So the goodies are on the side of sneaking on their neighbors and the harsh implementation of lockdown guidelines, not guidance, not law, guidance. It leaves huge gaps for very inconsistent policing and really ruining the relationship between the police and the public, which is not a good idea. It's going to be it's going to take time to get that trust back, I imagine, watching 6 or 7 policemen. And my mates up in Sheffield, when their pub was still allowed to open, they had a police car parked out there from 9:30 every night. I'm like, surely there must be something else going on in this town than you have to park and wait for someone who's, finishing their last drink.
As somebody myself who comes from the political left, one thing I cannot get my head around, Laurence, is the seeming support, in fact, not only support, but the left at the moment, the Labour Party in particular, they seem to want harder lockdowns, more severe punishments. Why do you think it is that the left are so supportive of these authoritarian Tory lockdowns?
Because the left are authoritarian and they like to tell people what to do. Fundamentally, the extreme left, that's what they like to do. So you give them a bit of power and they'll take a bit more. It's sad. It's just very sad. And the Tory government should not be extolling it and actually encouraging it as well, which is what they're doing. It's bad news on that front.
But also the Labour Party I find this, Harry, just amazing, how they're also supporting the tech billionaires. They want a clampdown on anybody who challenges this position. They want new COVID laws to penalise people from having an opinion at all about what's going on. There's a huge schism going on here, surely, Laurence, about why are the left supporting suppression of freedom of speech? Why are they supporting lockdowns? Where is the opposition?
Well, the left are a means to an end, aren't they? So it doesn't really matter it doesn't really matter what they do in order to achieve their goal. I think they're supporting it because it's controlling. And I think that what will happen is when someone comes for them, they'll then finally wake up and realise that they've sleepwalked into this situation of their own accord. But all Keir Starmer does is pick up what Boris Johnson's done and just go harder, faster, more. There is no opposition. This is not there is no one opposing the government position, even as a matter of principle, rather than, because they fundamentally agree with it. You need some opposition, some well-placed opposition, and Keir's not doing that.
So before we move on to how the Reclaim Party are going to be an effective opposition to this, something leapt out at me today. There's a piece in Spiked talking about the inequality of the lockdown on the working classes, and it's a staggering statistic. The incomes of the poorest have been hit the hardest in the UK. They've dropped by 14%. 14%, that's a huge hit. That's 14% of not a lot already, Laurence, whereas the middle classes, the comfortable, have saved, on average, £400 a month during the lockdown. Now, Laurence, last night on my way home, I saw 3 people stopped getting tickets for not wearing masks on the London Underground. One of those women was crying her eyes out and begging not to be fined. Laurence, this is an inhumanity that's going on. It feels to me like a purge, it feels oppressive, and it doesn't feel like Britain.
No, it doesn't feel like Britain at all, does it? It feels like some weird dystopian nightmare. Yeah. I don't know where you really start with it. Once you give the police powers, also it's not even law, so it's guidance. And in any situation like this, where lockdowns, anything, it's always going to disadvantage the poorest in society anyway. But the right has its own problem as well by sneering at the free laptops for students as well. It's just a very polarized debate now. And as I was saying to you earlier, I'm trying to educate a kid who's got some academic challenges, and just locking everybody down, it just exacerbates all of these problems for everybody else. And then leaving your house and looking, my kids don't trust the police anymore. That's quite a big change, isn't it? Bearing in mind from what it was, they see them as a sort of internal army that are there to control and tell you what to do. They're how it should be, where you go up to a copper when you're lost and you're in trouble. Nowadays, you turn it back and run a mile from that bunch at the moment.
Okay, so Laurence, before we move on to your law and order plans, really exciting plans, Harry, I want to bring you in at this point. Mate, you've walked the beat. You've been a copper. How does it make you feel as a former serving officer to see what's going on now? That people crying in the streets about being given tickets they can't afford to pay, for going for a walk, for sitting on a park bench, for forgetting to wear a mask on the underground. What's gone on, mate?
Well, it's absolutely unrecognisable from policing in my day, which admittedly is quite a long time ago now. But we understood as police officers that our duty was twofold. It was to uphold the law on behalf of the community, and it was to keep the Queen's peace. That's it. That's it. And of course, on top of, additional to that, if somebody came up and wanted direction to go somewhere, you would do it. You would do this thing where you would advise a member of the public. But it might be anything from the best place to plant their onions to the way to the nearest Tesco. What we weren't doing was advising people with a coercive threat. Now, we had this ridiculous situation the other day where the police were fining people because they were outside of the spirit of the lockdown. Now, what is the spirit of the lockdown? I have no idea what the spirit of the lockdown is. And I have no idea what power that the police thought that they were exercising when they tried to enforce the spirit of the lockdown with the coercive power of penal punishment. That kind of nonsense, unfortunately, is being encouraged. Association, and it's being encouraged by Matt Hancock, and yesterday it was being encouraged by Priti Patel. And we've moved from the position where we would explain, encourage, and then enforce, and we're now moving directly to enforcement. Except what they're enforcing is not even clear. You're allowed to exercise, but only locally. What does locally mean? Well, it depends where you live, doesn't it? Because, where I live, the local shop is a 16-mile round journey. I imagine that round here, the local shop is probably stepping out your front door and maybe walking one street away. What does local even mean? And how have we got to a situation where taking a flask of tea for a walk in the countryside,
it's a picnic,
to do your daily exercise, is then forbidden because the police have decided that constitutes a picnic, and picnics are forbidden. I have no idea where any of this comes from, but of course part of this is because the government regularly uses the word law, guidance, rules, and spirit of interchangeably. And so they don't know what they mean by law, the police don't know what they mean by law, rules, etc. And the public have no idea whatsoever. Now, what happens in a situation like that is, in order to comply, you do nothing. You simply stay at home because the law is so vague and so poorly applied that the safest thing to do is simply to stay at home.
I agree. Look, there's a few Twitter polls running on my feed at the moment. Please get involved. We're going to read out those results at the end of the show. The first one is currently, do you think the police have been overly politicised? And it will come as no surprise at the moment. 93% say yes. Have your say on my Twitter feed. And another poll that's going out right now is, should we do more about this? Number two, poll two, do you agree that the way the police have dealt with lockdowns and anti-lockdown protests? And 87% of people are against the way it's being enforced, Harry. 87% of people are not happy with what's going on. That's a significant number.
Which is because it doesn't, I don't care whether you're a lockdown skeptic or whether you're a lockdown enthusiast. Both parties have a right to be able to access clear law, so that if they choose to break the law, they know they're doing it. Okay, it shouldn't be vague. Now, Lord Sumption makes the point that there are certain laws which people should morally choose to break. But what's important is that you know that you are breaking them. And at that point, you make a decision okay, do I break them or don't I break them? What's the consequence of breaking them? I'm prepared to pay, to pay that consequence because I'm looking towards the greater good. I'm acting on a spirit of principle. And if it's going to cost me £100, well, it's going to cost me £100. But what we have at the moment is a situation where we don't even know. That is the definition of an arbitrary an arbitrary law.
Okay, so there's lots that needs to be fixed here. Laurence Fox, I want to cut back to you now if I can, Captain. So we have a system that needs reclaiming. It needs to be brought back into check. Tell us, Captain Fox, your plans to overhaul law and order. Spell it out.
It's just been spelled out by Harry. It's very, very simple. It's to police by consent. It's to be very clear about what the law is, and it's to totally and absolutely depoliticise the police force. That's it. It's not complicated. The police should not have should not be a political entity in any way. And public faith needs to be restored in the police. So therefore, we have to think about police and crime commissioners and what we do there. So yeah, and that's including all of them and all the mayorals as well, because that's where you can elicit change.
So are you saying to me, Laurence, that the Reclaim Party are planning to stand police and crime commissioner candidates in May if those elections happen?
They're not going to happen in May, are they? They're going to be moved. The government will do anything they can do to move democracy backwards as much as possible. But yes, please go onto our website and register your interest at thereclaimparty.co.uk. And Harry will fill you in on the important details of it. But it's just so simple. We just need to reclaim our faith in the police, really, and that's to allow the police to do their job. And their job is very simple. Where the law, where law should trump human rights legislation and stuff like that. We have legal provision in this country for how the police should operate, and it should be simple and it should be clear. And it doesn't seem to me to be a very complex task, actually.
Okay, well, if people were triggered by you on BBC Question Time talking about white privilege, Laurence, they're going to be one hell of a trigger coming down the road if they think you're going to be standing candidates to take over police and crime commissioners' spots.
Well, it doesn't matter. I don't want to take over the police and crime commissioners. If they're still there, then just do your job. Actually, that's in itself a difficult thing to say, because what is the police and crime commissioner's job? It's a political appointee anyway. But let's take the politics out of policing, please, and restore public faith in it, public trust in it.
Well, that's a bombshell revelation. Now, back to you, Harry, because I know that you are going to be aiding and abetting. Before we get to that, let's quickly talk a bit about your background as a copper, the reason why you set up Fair Cop, and tell us about this ludicrous example of where you were told off about some poetry you'd written.
No, I hadn't written the poetry at all. It was simply a feminist lyric from a feminist songwriter that I happened to have seen. Obviously, I'd seen it and I thought, oh, that's funny, and retweeted it and hadn't given it another thought.
What did it say?
It said, your breasts are made of silicon, your vagina goes nowhere, and we can tell the difference even when you're not there. Your hormones are synthetic. Let's just cross this bridge. What you have, something is male privilege. That was it.
Yeah.
That was it. It was it was a feminist. It was a verse from a feminist song. I'd seen it, thought it was mildly amusing, retweeted it, and then somebody, this vague character called Mrs. B, who has been granted unconditional anonymity by the police and by the High Court, took it upon themselves to report me via the True Vision reporting portal, which allows you to report people for any form of hate incident, not providing any evidence.
Hate incident, poetry.
Non-crime hate incident. Okay, so they reported me on the basis that my workplace on Immingham Dock, which employs a whole bunch of hairy-arsed dockers, that my presence there was a danger to the trans people, the trans dockers on Immingham Dock. Well, I'm not aware that we have any trans dockers on Immingham Dock, certainly not in my company. And secondly, in over 20 years of business, we've not had a single employment tribunal based on a breach of the Equality Act.
So you were reported,
or the acts that were in place prior to 2010.
So you were reported, and what happened?
So a fellow called PC Gull from Humberside Police turned up at my workplace. I wasn't there, so we spoke on the telephone, and he said to me that he'd seen this limerick, that it constituted hate speech. I asked him, "Is this a crime?" He says, "No, it's not a crime." I said, "Well, if it's not a crime, why are you ringing me?" And he said, "I need to check your thinking." So I said to him, "Really? You are a police officer. I've not committed a crime." "Yes, this is correct. But you're ringing me to check my thinking." He said, "Yes, I'm ringing you to check your thinking." I said, "Have you any idea what that makes you?" And he said, "No."
The thought police.
That's what I said. I said George Orwell's 1984 was a dystopian novel, not a police how-to manual. But that completely passed him by. Anyway, to cut a long story short, I was told that whilst I committed no crime, I really shouldn't be committing these non-crime hate incidents because I was upsetting members of the trans community. When I said I'm engaged in a political debate, that's all. All I have done is comment, as the government has called us to comment, as part of the national conversation surrounding proposed reforms to the Gender Recognition Act. I have commented, and one of the things that I have said is that I don't believe that human beings, as mammals, can change sex.
Yeah.
Now, an inspector rang me and said that me expressing the view that humans don't change sex was offensive to the trans community. And whilst it was not illegal for me to say that, at this point, I just told them to get stuffed and launched a judicial review.
A second hate crime.
Well, apparently there were 30 tweets that I'd done, some of which had said, I mean, one of the things that I'd said was, who won the 1976 men's decathlon? Because apparently Caitlyn Jenner has always been a female. So who won that gold in 1976? Asking that question was classed as a non-crime hate crime.
Well, in many ways.
Now then, get this. The reason that they intervened was because the police said that this was the first staging post to committing genocide and murder.
What?
No, absolutely. They've got a five-stage system, and using wrong speech.
Are you actually being serious?
Stage number one, it's called anti-locution. Okay, and any form of speech which is considered to be hate speech, and hate speech is any speech that anybody decides is hate speech. That is the staging post to a 5-stage process which will lead to genocide and extermination.
Laurence Fox,
I was on stage one.
Laurence, I can see your brow is knitting so much there, mate. You basically knit one per one. What is going on? I mean, this is a bit of poetry that you retweeted. What even is poetry?
Well, I mean, it all comes from the right place, doesn't it? You know, because it comes from the Stephen Lawrence area where they wish that they were in the house and they'd heard what these guys had planned. So it's like, I get sort of where it comes from, but there's no such. You're in absolute hell when you're sitting there judging what hate is, and who gets to choose what's hate. What sort of person is going to want to choose what's hate? The more controlling, authoritarian members of society. It's insanity. And Harry, the good thing about Harry is he can just break it down into very simple logic. But yeah, we don't need thought police. We don't need hate crime either. And we certainly don't need, the police need to do policing. It's pretty simple. Reduce crime.
One of the problems is we have a definition of hate set out by the College of Policing, and which has been borrowed from the CPS.
Yeah.
Actually, which defines hatred as hostility. And then it defines hostility as, get this, antagonism. So if you're antagonistic, let's think about what the word antagonism means. It simply means making a challenge, making a verbal challenge. Spite. Well, spite is as far removed from what happened in Stephen Lawrence's case. Spite is when you decide to grow your leylandii 6 foot high in order to pee off the neighbours. That's spite, isn't it? Ill will, unfriendliness, spite, dislike. Unfriendliness and dislike are classed as hatred. And they are classed as the first stage, the departure point to genocide. That is in the College of Policing guidance. That is the
College
rationale
of
for it.
Policing.
And what we say is that that's absolute, complete and utter nonsense.
Yeah, do you know what? I'm finding this. I know quite a lot about this. I spend way too much time looking into this. I'm finding this absolutely flabbergasting. It's absolutely cretinous that we're even sitting here talking about poetry being stage one towards genocide. Laurence Fox, are we the only sane people left on this planet? What's going on?
Well, you've got to give people credit. They're trying to do the right thing. It's just that they've got it wrong on this one. But it's everywhere. It's all over the shop. So it's good. It just needs standing up to calmly and reasonably, as Harry does, and just goes, "This is why it doesn't make any sense." And it doesn't make any sense. But it's in every institution. It's in the police. It's increasingly in the judiciary. So it's good that we're standing up to it and resisting it, and that's all we can do. The pendulum will swing back in the right direction. It just might need a bit of a harder shove than we thought.
To be fair, Lawrence, I think you're being far too generous. I
You would though,
think
Harry.
you're being far too generous and liberal. I think the police con us by suggesting that they're trying to do the right thing, where in actual fact they're doing no such thing. Because what the McPherson report requires them to do is proper, unbiased policing. Okay, and they've decided to substitute the hard work of policing for this flim-flam rubbish, where they're supposed to be getting proper intelligence about a bunch of white guys who make stabbing motions as they express a desire to go out and hang, stab and kill a black person. Okay, that's proper intelligence, and that deserves early intervention because somebody's going to get killed. Okay, what they've done, that takes hard police work. So what they've done instead is go after me retweeting a limerick, my friend saying, okay, my friend was reported to Wiltshire Police for saying all cats are Methodists. No, my cat's a Methodist. That's it. That was classed as hate speech.
Do I laugh or cry at this? I'm not sure what to make of it. Are you being
No,
serious?
because somebody used the True Vision portal and reported my friend to Wiltshire Police and said, this implies that Methodists are like cats and go around shitting and pissing in people's back gardens. And this is the first stage. This is stage one. This is stage one
Of cat genocide.
of genocide of Methodists. Okay. Now we challenged Wiltshire Police on this, and they have refused to take it down. They say, because we have a thing called perception-based recording. Okay. If somebody perceives it to be a hate crime, it's a hate crime. That's it. So we've got a judicial review that we've launched alongside the Free Speech Union, I think, to say this is utter nonsense. So when Laurence says it comes from a right place, no, it doesn't. It comes from a place of utter laziness, because they would much rather tick the Limerick box and the Methodist cat box than do some actual hard policing. And it's because they're lazy. They're lazy and they're politically stupid. And that's why people like me and people like Laurence need to get in there and shake them up and say, you are not doing your job. You are simply not doing your job. You're pretending to have taken the Stephen Lawrence report and applied it, but you haven't.
Okay,
But we also don't want to be, what we need to be is we live in very polarized times. So we do have to, wherever we can, I completely agree with what you say, Harry, but what we have to do is we have to at least open the door for them to get out. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. If we go at them with cudgels, which we will do, but we also need to say, look, we understand that it comes from the right place, but it's gone way too far, and this is what we're going to replace it with. And that is what I feel is going to be the better approach. Nice silk glove, very hard iron fist underneath it.
Yeah, and we've discussed this. What we are asking for, we're asking this of chief constables and PCCs. Don't be political. Number one.
Yeah.
If it looks political, it is political, and you have no business whatsoever engaging with anything that looks political. That your locus of control is the law. not guidance, not the spirit of, not Westminster, not Priti Patel. It's the law, and that's it. Lord Sumption makes this point in an article that he's written in his last day or two.
In the Telegraph. Yeah, came out today, yeah.
In the Telegraph. That's exactly it. It's not the job of the police to make up law on the behest of Priti Patel, Westminster, or anybody else.
Yeah.
And the police need to be answerable to the community, not Westminster. And it's the job of the PCC to represent the community and to hold the Chief Constable to account on behalf of the community. Now, what's happening with PCCs at the moment is that PCCs have become cheerleaders of Chief Constables, and to be fair to Priti Patel, she has recognised that recently. But her answer is more power from Westminster.
Yeah, yeah.
Our answer is less power from Westminster and more control from community-based PCCs who they may themselves be part of a political party.
Okay.
But the insistence is that the Chief Constable are absolutely, fundamentally,
Okay.
no compromise, non-political.
Before we get into the specifics and the nuts and bolts of your plans, want to involve the viewers out there. This poll is going nuts. Over 2,000 votes on this during the show, and it's still a landslide victory. Do you think the police is overly politicised? 93% are saying yes, there's still time to get involved. Use the hashtag unlock the police. And by the way, you can support our media for the princely sum of £3.61 a month. That's less than a beer, probably not where you're from.
2 beers where we come from.
There you go, mate, in the Working Man's Club. £3.61 to support media that makes a difference. Help us make media that makes a difference. Please support us. Let's get back now to the specifics of where you intend to stand. You are going to stand, Harry Miller, as a police and crime commissioner for the Reclaim Party. In which area and what are your plans and what's your manifesto for change?
Well, we haven't decided who's standing where or if, because what
Are you
decided
sure, mate? You can.
No. What we've decided is we're giving the incumbent PCCs the opportunity to do their job. And to be fair, if Boris does put back the elections, they've got to do their job, and they're doing their job is simple. It's representing the community and holding the Chief Constable to account.
Yeah.
And where necessary, it's sacking the Chief Constable and replacing the Chief Constable, because if the Chief Constable places, for instance, diktats from Westminster or diktats from the unelected body called the College of Policing, if they put that above law and above the interests of the community, it's the job of the PCC to fire them. Now, what we're saying is that PCCs need to strip Chief Constables and police forces of everything that even looks political. So, rainbow flags, membership of Stonewall, taking the knee.
What's wrong with Stonewall?
What's wrong with Stonewall? Stonewall published a document called the UK General Election. Makes them political, and the police have no business whatsoever engaging and being part of a membership scheme or a champions programme with anything that has a political manifesto.
They're going to call you transphobes and homophobes right off the first bat, aren't they?
Yeah, well, I don't. You know, we don't care. We just don't care, because we're not transphobic and we're not homophobic. But irrespective of that, even if you think we are, again, I don't really care. It's the job of the police to operate without fear or favour, and it's the job of the police not to give even the impression of being political.
Laurence is smiling and laughing away. Laurence, I better cut back to you before we get to Deneise.
I love Harry. I just love the fact that he knows it. He said to me at one point the other day, he went, it wouldn't matter if you were the Communist Workers' Party, as long as you thought that, you know, if we were on the same page about this, because he's right. It's not it. All you're doing is really simple, and it's why it's sort of really difficult to get kind of about it. It's like, just remove the politics from the police. Let the police do their job. In fact, make them do their job, and that's it. Allow them, free them up to do their job. That's what you want, without fear or favour. As Harry says. I laugh because I love how passionate he is about it, and it's his subject, and it inspires me.
I think that's what people want now. Waiting very patiently in the wings, Deneise Florence-Dukes. Sorry to keep you waiting so long. We've got 3 gas bags here, and we can barely get a word in, darling. But look, you've been listening into this. You're a sergeant in the Met. You've been walking that walk. You know what it's like to be a police officer. Having heard what's been on the show so far on Unlocked, what's your take about, I'm interested in the opinion of the rank and file police officer. Do they want to be implementing what ministers are dreaming up of an evening and telling them to do the next day? Or is there a sense that actually they quite like a bit of dictatorial power?
I think it's a combination of the two. I think in general, you've got people who have got this real dichotomy of, when you look at the core role of the police, which is protecting life and property, preserving order, bringing offenders to justice and so on, they're being detracted from that. And I think that's a great shame. And I think that I think it was the West Yorkshire Police Federation made a comment yesterday about their police officers are feeling really ashamed about what they're having to do. And you can understand why. They are political pawns. But then there's a big difference between different police forces. If you take Derbyshire Police, for instance, they've been very overzealous, I would call it, from day dot in the first lockdown, second and this lockdown. For instance, colouring picturesque blue waters black so people won't go to them, putting drones in the air on the Peak District and so on. And then we had only last weekend the two women that were exercising, I think quite legitimately, in Formott, which is just down the road from me, who, as you quite rightly pointed out, were a sandwich short of a picnic, which is just not, isn't it? It's absolutely ludicrous. And they said it was akin to being surrounded by a whole team of police officers that would just basically lying in wait for them. So we've got that dichotomy, and also, you know, when you look back at just before Christmas, the message that the Met Police were putting out about, we're not going to come knocking on your door to see how many people you've got around the table, and then in the next breath they're coming down really heavy on people. So I think there's a lot of mixed messages out there. I did pick up, interestingly, on your point about why the left are probably so pro lockdown. And I think there's a good reason for that. And that you mentioned that about this real disparity in inequality, that they're being hardest hit. So I think they see it as a way out. They think, right, let's lock down, let's get on top of this virus. As soon as we can get back to some normality, they can start, you know, building their lives back. And I think that's probably the reason why you're not seeing so much of an opposition from them. But as in terms of the police force, I think it's a great shame for them, because certainly the officers I know just want to crack on, do their job, and they're being used as these pawns. It's a great shame.
That's a really, really interesting point you bring up there, and I hadn't thought of it like that. And it's if COVID is being used as this political tool, not only we've seen in Scotland and the kind of unionist movement in Ireland as a way of driving political wedges in, but if the very notion that the hardest hit in society are being played into poverty to make a point, I find absolutely disgusting. If that's the truth,
well, I'm surprised.
Why would I ever vote for the Labour Party again? And they're the party of my birth.
Journalists haven't picked up on that and aren't running with it, because to my mind it's blatantly obvious. But I don't know what the way forward is with it, to be quite frank. It's a real dilemma, and as Harry was saying about police and crime commissioners being politicised, and they set the agenda for the police constables. So it's a very important role that they get it right, because they're the drivers. And like you said, Harry, that the community, it should be the community that are deciding what's important to them, not politicians in Westminster. But it's going to be interesting going forward, as you've said about devolvement to mayors and so on, because the police and crime commissioners slowly are going to be eroded away, and it's going to be mayors that are going to be deciding all these things. So in my mind, there's even more chance of it becoming more political. So that's one coming down the pipe, I think, that you've got to be very wary of.
Do you think that police and crime commissioners, largely coming from political parties, do you think they understand the importance of a non-political police force?
No, not at all.
I don't either.
No, if you take Staffordshire, for instance, where I am, the whole area is blue. So we've got a blue MP, we've got a blue county council, we've got a blue borough council, and we've got a blue police and crime commissioner. It's very hard to make an inroad on there. And even when I sat on the police and crime panel, the composition of the panel itself are appointees from local authorities. So if you've got a majority that are blue, then the people on the panel are going to be blue. So your chances of real overview and scrutiny are absolutely zero. And that's the big problem.
I don't think, I remember taking my own PCC to task and asking him that question. Do you think, a very straightforward question, do you think PCC should be, police forces should be political? And his answer shocked me, because he said, well, the thing is, Harry, everything's political. I said, but it's not, is it? It's not. Everything's not political. That's a cop-out. We have the Code of Ethics states that the mere appearance of being political is forbidden. Now, if that's the case, you can't have that to be true and then say, well, everything's political, so it doesn't matter. It's nonsense. I just get the impression that certainly that particular PCC doesn't have a clue what being political means, and therefore he's no interest whatsoever in stopping the chief constable from being political, because they don't understand what it is.
Well, as you hit the nail on the head, it's largely a political appointment, isn't it? You know, because it's so expensive to run as a police and crime commissioner. It costs a lot of money. You've got a big electorate there. It's only the big parties that can afford to put up candidates. If you've got an independent candidate, it's very difficult for them to make an inroad, I think, because they haven't got that weight behind them. And the concern to me, certainly for this May's elections, or whenever they're going to be, possibly next May is my guess. What you've got there is they're going to coincide, certainly in Staffordshire, with the county elections. So you've got that heavyweight Tory literature and door knocking or whatever it is going on out there. They're going to get the same ballot papers, and it's so easy for them just to tick the same old candidate, and it's going to be difficult to make an inroad, I think.
Okay. So you've obviously got a lot of experience, Deneise. You've got form, you know your onions. Do you reckon you might get involved again? Police and Crime Commissioner yourself?
I'd love to. I think because it's such a great opportunity to give the people what they want and what they need. And I was a victim of crime myself, probably a few months ago now. It was a case of criminal damage. I knew who the suspect was. It was a young lad that was stood up on the top bank lobbing bricks down at our cars and did an awful lot of damage, actually. Now, I knew who he was. He was a schoolboy. I'd identified him. But the police wouldn't take any action. They said, oh, no, it's not in their interest. And I thought, well, they've got enough there just to bring him in and interview him under caution. But no, they wouldn't even do that. Transversely, I was involved in another matter where a person of colour had been accused of being racist. They complained to the police, and within probably about 10 minutes, there was 2 police officers on the doorstep addressing that issue. There was referrals for support, there was ongoing contact. You know, there's that real big difference between what their priorities are. And that's a great shame, because as Laurence said, people are losing confidence in their police. And we'll get to a stage, I think, where we're going to have private security firms, because neighbourhoods are going to get that cheesed off with not having police to rely on, that they're going to start taking matters to their own hands, whether that's as vigilantes, God forbid, or as, you know, employing private security. I think I can definitely see it going down that way if there's not some massive intervention soon.
I think there's a real dichotomy there, and you're absolutely right that this feeling that the police are policing tweets and not streets. If a car is being bricked and it's not a crime, and suddenly you send an offensive tweet and there's the boot boys at your door, if there's a sense, as we saw throughout the whole summer, a real feeling, I believe, of a two-tiered system, standing off Black Lives Matter, soft-soaping Extinction Rebellion, taking the knee, doing dances of pride, and then on the other hand, standing by as the cenotaph is vandalised. There's a huge problem, I think, in terms of people's confidence in the police. And I don't want that to be the case. We should respect coppers, but this rot It's coming from the top, isn't it?
Well, part of the problem comes from the 2002 Police Act, where they changed the oath and they inserted, not only does a police officer now swear to keep the Queen's peace, to uphold the law as they did, now added to that, they're supposed to uphold human rights. Now, that's a really odd one, because which human rights are the police supposed to be upholding? Because a human right, which is a legitimate human right in the UK, has been embodied in British law. But then there are other human rights which are not embodied in British law, and therefore they're contested human rights. And if it's a contested human right, it's a political issue. And unfortunately, the police are so busy policing what they consider to be these human rights things, that they're having to make a decision, because they've only got a certain number of bobbies, only got a certain amount of money, so they're making a decision. Do we go after the run-of-the-mill stoning of a car, or do we go after a misgendering? Well, we'll go after a misgendering because that serves the human rights element, and it's a lot easier than serving the preserving law and order.
Okay. So we can all agree. I think everyone on this show today agrees that something needs to be done about this. But in practical terms, I want to put this to everybody, all the guests. In practical terms, and certainly in terms of how the Reclaim Party intends to stand, how do we fix this? We'll start with Laurence Fox, if we could. Laurence, so if you're going to stand in an election in May or whenever it is, how do we actually and practically depoliticise the police and make positive change?
Refer you to Harry for that one, I'm afraid. This is his area of passion.
Harry, how do we fix this? Because everybody agrees on this, that it needs to be sorted out. How do we sort this out?
The only thing that needs, well, there are two things that need to fundamentally change. One, we need to throw out the human rights element of policing, because the only human rights, as I just said, that the police should be interested in are those which are embodied in British law. The second thing we need to throw out and shut down is the College of Policing, because the government have subcontracted out policing to this limited company called the College of Policing, which, to be fair, is filled with failed inspectors and academics who just don't know what they're doing. These are the people who invent this nonsense like non-crime hate incident, whereby me showing unfriendliness toward a group or disagreeing with a group becomes a recordable
Stage one of genocide.
Yeah, stage one of genocide. So that body needs shutting down.
Yeah.
Beyond that, all we want is for the police to follow their own code of ethics. That's it. It's a really, really simple solution.
And Deneise, if I throw this back to you, Deneise, do you think that's what coppers want? Do you think coppers want to be rid of this crap? Pardon my use of words.
Police officers do. If you were to ask any police officer what's the motivation for them joining the force, they would say they want to serve their community. I'd argue they're not serving the community at the moment. I think, interestingly, I think what's happening, what we're witnessing, is police officers that, quite frankly, are bored. They've got nothing to do at the moment. With everyone in lockdown, where do they focus their attention on? And it's sitting up in parks waiting for people to, to pitch up. I think that's what we're witnessing. They're just trying to justify, going out and earning their crust every day.
They're doing COVID overtime patrols. So officers are being given the opportunity to go out and work overtime, just patrolling, making sure that the pubs don't have a light on, making sure that people aren't gathering in parks, making sure that people aren't doing more than one session of exercise, and certainly not with a flask. They're being paid overtime to do this.
Well, hang on a sec. We're paying them.
Yeah,
the public are paying for this nonsense.
Yeah.
The public are paying for a Stasi. This isn't what I recognise as the police force, and I'm a big supporter of the police. And I've been consistently supportive of the police. This is not an attempt to knock the cops. We need the cops.
Absolutely.
All this nonsense about abolish the police, no, we need the police more than ever. And Unlocked viewers agree with that.
Yeah.
This isn't about getting rid of the cops. It's about reformation. It's about reclaiming the police.
Reclaiming the police, letting the police do what when a police officer signs up and when they take that oath to the Queen, they do it They do it with honesty, they do it with integrity, and they do it with good intention. And then what happens is they are smothered with all this woke nonsense. Absolute woke nonsense.
Yeah, I think we can all agree on that.
Do your job. That's it. It's just do your job.
Do your job, Loza.
That's
Yes.
it. It's that's the policy. Do your job. And you know, we've worked out that we've got a 10-point plan as to how that's going to be done, which you'll be able to see at some point. But essentially, it's do your job, and then everyone will be happy.
Okay, 10-point plan. Can you shed any more light on what those 10 points are, Harry? What are the headlines about your what's the backbone of Reclaim's policy of reclaiming the police?
Depoliticising the police, making sure that the police making sure that the PCC understands that they hold the Chief Constable to account on behalf of the community, not on behalf of Westminster. That that they are to be a barrier between Westminster and the Chief Constable, not a conduit. That anything that looks like politics has to be gone. That's it. Just kick it out, because if it's a contested human right, it's a political issue, and therefore the police have no right whatsoever to be involving themselves.
So Harry, how many other coppers or candidates are there out there that think like you and want to be a part of this movement? Is it one man and his dog, or
I'm hoping that there's lots.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that there's lots. I mean, anecdotally, we know that there are lots. I know a lot of police officers. There are a lot of police officers who love my organisation, Fair Cop, because that's what we want. We believe in police officers. We believe in constables. We believe in those officers who want to go out and do what they signed up to do. What we stand against is errant PCCs and chief constables who have become political.
Yeah. And absolutely, I can echo that. When we polled people on this on Unlocked earlier this week, we had like 12,000 votes. That's a lot more than YouGov poll, and YouGov polls are fixed anyway. And our poll came back, half of the public blame central government, 25% blame police top brass. It's like 20% blame the public, because hey, the public need to do their thing too. And only 10%, Harry, only 10% blamed Bobby's on the beat. So there isn't an anti-Bobby on the beat movement going on. There's a sense they are following bad orders.
Yeah, we are for the Bobby on the beat.
Yeah.
We are for the community. We are for the Bobby on the beat.
It's vital.
We are against the politicisation of the police.
But it's really, really important that we make that point. Now, we don't want to go around banging the Bobbies on the beat. It's not fair.
No, not even PC Gull, who was the one who came and had a go at me. I've not criticised him really. The only time I've ever criticised him.
You're getting a bit carried away now, Harry.
He was a product of training. As he said to me, quite famously, when I challenged him, he said, "I've been on a course."
Yeah.
Well, those courses that teach police officers nonsense need shutting down.
Yeah. I want to bring Deneise back in quickly before we wrap up the show. Deneise, you've heard what's going on. You said you like to throw your hat in the ring. Do you fancy getting involved with these lads?
We'll have a conversation later, but yeah, there's lots of work to be done, that's for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Harry, he's got to get out there and do something, change things. That's
Maybe
what
that came out a bit wrong, actually, when I said you fancy getting involved with these lads. Sorry. Maybe that's a hate crime. Hey, report
That is
me,
a hate crime.
please. Yeah,
I'm reporting you on the
me,
True
and you'll
Vision.
know where to find me. I'll be in Unlocked HQ. Right, I want to wrap up now, if we can. I think it's been a brilliant show, and I really, what we want to do on Unlocked is try and change things. We have a voice. We know CCHQ. Watch Unlocked. We had a real result with Laurence Fox on the show before in November, when we had the government do a U-turn on cancelling Remembrance Sunday. And Laurence, I proudly marched with you to Marble Arch, and we stood at the War Memorial. That was one example of how we can get real change by making these buggers listen and support us, and we can keep doing this. And we really want to change the police for the good. No, we don't want to slag them off endlessly. It's pointless and it's mindless.
We're not slagging them off. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Where the police go wrong, it's because they've been badly advised.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that in the vast majority of cases.
Yeah.
So get rid of the advisors.
Yeah.
And get rid of the PCCs who allow this nonsense.
And please, no more TikTok videos at Pride. Please, no more taking the knee. Please, no more press-ups and showing us your muscles and body popping. Stop it. Just be coppers. Just do your job. As Laurence Fox says, police with authority and command respect, and we will respect you. You can't say any fairer than that.
You can't.
Good. Well, look, thanks for tuning. You agree with me? I expect an argument. Thanks for tuning in to this first episode of Unlocked in our new home. I think we've done a great job. We did it together. There's Alex, my director in the background. He helped knock this together. I think we've done a nice little job. It's our new home, and we want to keep on delivering media that makes a difference. Please get involved. Send us your comments. Pump it around social media. Follow us. Please share. Get involved. We've got a great new show for Friday nights coming up. Myself and Dominic Frisby are having a bit of a late night lock-in. We're going to be taking the Michael out of politics and current affairs and trying to put a bit of fun back into the world, because God, what a joyless place it is, where we sit around listening about Methodist cats, where we sit around listening about feminist poetry being a hate crime. Do you know what? Sometimes I feel like we're the only sane people left. But guess what? There's one person who's really kept us smiling throughout this entire lockdown, and it's the comedian Andrew Lawrence. If you don't follow him, you've been really missing out. He's been satirising and taking the mickey out of the lockdown, out of professors, out of wokeism, and out of the police, has to be said, all the way through. We're going to finish tonight's Unlocked with a short clip of Andrew Lawrence as PC Pisspot from Twat Valley Police, giving his how should we say, comedic take on the police, which actually is less ridiculous than the real thing. Thanks for watching Unlocked, and we're going to finish tonight's show with Andrew Lawrence, and we'll see you next time.
Hello, I'm Sergeant Constable Detective Officer Peter Pisspot from Twat Valley Police. As COVID infection rates continue to rise, it's become clear that many of you have stopped following the regulations. It has therefore become necessary for myself and my fellow officers to clamp down hard on anyone suspected of breaking these life-saving rules. I would like to remind you all that we are all in lockdown. You should remain at home wherever possible. Should you be foolish enough to take a walk in a location more than 5 miles from your house, you will be quickly surrounded by police officers, read your rights and fined £200. Should you be carrying a hot drink at the time, your penalty fine will increase accordingly, as hot drinks are classed as an illegal picnic. You will also receive a fine if you are not wearing a mask where we feel you should be. For example, whilst putting the bins out, or simply opening your back door to let your dog go for a wee in the garden. We also have the authority to break up any outdoor gatherings using reasonable force if necessary. If we need to break a few limbs in our battle against COVID, then so be it. Luckily, our new digital fine system makes it quicker and easier for us to take your money from you. Since its recent launch, there has been a 30% rise in COVID fines issued, raising vital revenue for a desperately underfunded UK police force. Happily, this significant income has allowed us to create new job roles for fairness and belonging directors who will oversee improved inclusive culture throughout the force and receive a mere 74 grand a year salary for their heroic efforts. Many of you will feel that all of these developments are a gross infringement on your civil liberties. But don't worry, once this pandemic's over, your personal freedoms will be returned to you. Probably. Remember, the virus is still at large. If you leave your house, people will die. So please remain a prisoner in your own home. Your mental health is not important to us at this time.